Babe, remember when we used to go on dates?
Yeah. When we had no kids.
That's right.
Those were the days. We went out on a lot of dates.
Yes, we did.
Yep.
But no more, because now we have kids.
And we're stuck at home.
Let's get into that.
Hey everybody, I'm Andrea Warnock.
I'm Nathan Warnock.
And you've joined us for Marriage Monday on the Marriage by Design podcast. And this is a time where we get to talk to you about marriage and the way God designed that, how we see that in the Bible, and how we live that out.
That's right. And this week we're coming at you on Marriage Monday with a conversation of dating at home. So tons of us since the last it's almost been a year now since coronavirus first made landfall in the United States. And for a lot of us, we've spent a huge percentage of that time at home. You might be in that position as you're watching this, where you've not spent a lot of time going out into public and going on dates outside of your home. And it could be that you have fallen in the habit of just not having dates at all during this time. Maybe it has nothing to do with coronavirus. Maybe it's just, like we mentioned in the open, you've got children at home, and it can be difficult to find babysitters. It can be difficult to find certainly reliable babysitters. It's expensive to get babysitters. So could be that you have been grounded from dating by your children.
Right. Yeah, and that can lead to, growing apart. We know quite a few couples, unfortunately, that have raised their kids and they were kind of doing, that was the thing that they did together, and then the kids go and they look at each other and say, well, I just don't even really know you anymore, so peace out.
Right.
So we know several couples, and just because we know several couples doesn't mean necessarily anything, but there's tons of studies out there that show that that's a pretty common thing to get the kids out, and then divorce happens a lot of times, or sometimes within that, when the kids is the only common denominator, because that couple has just put so much effort into the kids that they just grow apart.
Yeah, it seems like this has definitely been a growing trend in our parents' generation. Of, you have children, and there's a billion studies that talk about how, one of the worst things that can happen for a child is that their parents get divorced. And so I think there were a lot of couples who either intentionally decided, hey, we don't have a good marriage, but we're going to stick it out for the sake of our kids. And then once their kids reached adulthood, then they, pulled the trigger on divorce. Or, kind of what we want to talk about today is couples that just weren't intentional during the time that they were raising their families, or maybe since the March of 2020 have maybe not been intentional about sowing into their marriages during this time, because when you date, you go out places, right? That's what you do. You go out to dinner. Typically. You go out to do some activity as a couple. Well, we wanted to come to you today and just give you some practical tips on dating at home, because dating at home can be just as rewarding as going out on dates. Maybe not if it's exclusive, like if all you're doing is having dates at home, but certainly having dates at home can be a great way to continue to date your spouse during this time of coronavirus, or during this time of having children in the home. Right. So we want to talk a little bit about the importance of making dating a priority, what that looks like. I want to talk a little bit about kind of a how to date at home, some practical advice with regards to that, and we'll sprinkle in some kind of tips that we have found, because so Andrew and I have, once a week, we have a date night. Once a month, we try to go out for our date night. But that means 3 or 4 other times each month, we are having a date night at home, within the 4 walls of our house.
Yeah, and I would say if you're thinking, oh, well, my spouse and I, every night when the kids go to bed, we hang out every night. Yeah, I would say that's probably not what you're doing. Probably what you're not doing is dating.
Right.
It's probably just
I agree with that. And that's we're just doing life.
I know you're going to talk about that. But But if you're saying like, oh yeah, I can turn this off, just hold on, because it's dating intentionally, even when you're inside, is different than just, we hang out every night together.
That's exactly right.
Which is a good thing.
Yeah, that's right. Totally. So we're going to talk about that and then talk a little bit about the dangers of becoming exclusively an at-home dating couple, because there's a balance here, right? We shouldn't just completely blow off dating because we're, quote, stuck at home. But on the other hand, if we never go out anywhere as a couple, that's not great for your relationship either. So we want to strike a balance there. But during this time where you might be doing more dating at home than dating out, how do we go about doing that? Why should that even be a priority? So I wanted to start there and say, for one thing, we see biblically, and we talk about this all the time, so we're not going to spend a ton of time in this episode rehashing God's design for marriage. I mean, it's the name of the channel, so we do come back to it frequently. But if you look at Genesis 2, Matthew 19, Ephesians 5. I'd encourage you read up on those in your own time if you've not heard us talk about them. God's clear design for marriage is to be a picture, an on-earth picture of His desired relationship with us as His people. So when we look at what God's design for our relationship with Him was meant to be, that should be reflected in our marriage. Clearly, our relationship with God through His Son Jesus is meant to be an ongoing dating relationship with Him. He desires to meet with us. He gives us the idea that the gift of prayer, where we get to enter into the very throne room of God through prayer and speak to Him through Jesus and through the Holy Spirit, who the Bible say in Hebrews mediates on our behalf. We get to speak to God the Father through them and have this ongoing, growing in intimacy relationship with Him. And, if our idea of Christianity is, well, we come to saving faith in Christ and then we go on living our lives. And that was great. Jesus is that guy I met back in 1998 at kids camp, and now I'm saved. My relationship with the Lord is going to be tortured at best, non-existent at worst, because I've not grown any intimacy or ongoing intimacy with Him.
Sure.
It's the same way in our marriage. If we aren't intentional about having a growing, continuing relationship with our spouse over the time that we're married, your relationship is either taking steps towards growth or it's taking steps towards death. It's not hanging out in the middle. So if we're not being intentional about taking steps towards growth, oneness, and intimacy in our marriage, we by default are taking steps towards disunity, frustration, and death within our marriage. So that's why we want to do this. Now, when we talk about dating at home, one thing that I really want to stress to everyone listening to this is we're talking about dating at home. We're not talking about hanging out at home. Right? So in our marriages, you and I hang out every night that we're both here. Right, we do the dishes together, or just talk. Right, exactly. Just talk a little bit together. We might watch a TV show together, listen to something on a podcast or music or whatever we want to do. Right, we hang out as a couple. That friendship is key in a marriage. That's really important. The problem is, the relationship that I have with Andrea is not meant to be the same as the relationship that I have with all the other friends in my life. Right. So there's tons of guys that I have over occasionally, and girls for you that you have over, where you watch a TV show, listen to music, hang out and talk. You hang out with those people. That's not the relationship that you and I have chosen to enter into, nor is it the relationship that God desires us to have. Dating is different. And you might be listening to this going, well, yeah, it's pretty much the same. Well, I would challenge you on that. If you're listening to this, and if you're a girl, and a guy called you and said, hey, remember I met you at that party that we had with your friend, that was great. Hey, I was wondering if you wanted to come over later tonight. I'm going to be doing the dishes. Well, I'll throw a show on, and you can sit on my couch and watch the TV show, and I'll just do the dishes, maybe fold some laundry, and you want to come hang out? Almost every girl is going to say what?
No.
Yeah, that's weird, right? And then they're going to call their friends and say weird, right? Because we recognize that's not dating, right? There's a place for folding laundry and doing dishes and hanging out, right? That's not what dating is. And when we allow dating in our minds to become, yeah, my wife and I date, we fold laundry together, we fool ourselves into thinking that we're being diligent to keep the romance alive in our marriage when we're actually not.
Sure. Yeah. So then let's talk about dating. How dating needs to have some intentional intimacy.
Right.
So it's not just kind of doing shoulder to shoulder activities,
right,
or whatever, things that isn't really creating an intimacy.
Right.
But they need to be we need to be doing things that are also really deepening our relationship.
Right.
So having some of those deep conversations, talking about things that we maybe disagree about and why, talking about our life goals and our futures together, and then also some spiritual intimacy too. What are you reading in the Word, and how is that affecting you, and what are some things that you're really struggling with in your relationship with the Lord? Those are all things that are going to create intimacy. And then of course the physical intimacy. I think it's really good for your date night to say, this is at minimum once a week, we're gonna have sex, or whatever, be physically intimate, whatever that looks like for you. So if you're a married couple, of course. So it's that kind of one at minimum guaranteed once a week, you both know what's going to happen. And then you have that, I don't know, because the physical side of things can easily, especially if you're raising kids and life is busy, just become something that doesn't slide because you mean to, but you get tired and you get busy and stuff happens. So having that physical intimacy,
it's
at a
important.
minimum of once a week, kind of that you both know is going to happen, is great too.
Right.
So using your date night for all levels of intimacy is really great. Not that every date night has to be that, but I think a lot of them should be. Yeah,
but I completely agree with that. And I would go as far as to continue our analogy of, we all understand what dating is, I think, at a basic level. It's just that when we get married and it gets more difficult to do that, or when circumstances around us make it more difficult to do that, we sort of want to fudge on what a date is. Because I think if you talk to most married couples, they would say, yeah, continuing to have a dating relationship with your spouse is important. Mm-hmm. But we start to fudge on like, oh, well, so do you do that? Well, yeah, we hang out together every night, right? It's what we keep coming back to. And when I think about dating, it is, if you think about it, an intentional, intimate encounter between two people. Right? And I don't mean intimate to mean sexually necessarily, because as we've talked about, if you're dating and not married, there shouldn't be a sexual aspect to that. But when we talk about dating, when I call Andrea and say, hey, I'd love to pick you up, let's go to dinner, and then maybe we'll go see a movie after dinner, right? And then her and I go to dinner at 5:30, and at 8:45, we're still sitting at that dinner table talking. That doesn't happen if there's not some intimate flow of conversation. Right. And in the same way, let's be honest, probably most of us have had really bad dates in the past. And I would venture to say the reason why it went sideways is probably, as you think about it, because at some point you realized on intimate issues, I'm not compatible with this person. So what are we doing here? Right? And so as we date as couples, when we're talking about dating at home or out, really, but when we're talking specifically about dating at home, I think we need to be even more intentional about doing it in a way that invites intimacy into our marriage. And so it could be like, there are tons of books out there. There's a book out there, I'm gonna butcher the name of it, so you're gonna have to Google it, and it should be right up towards the top. But it's like 1,001 questions you should ask before you're married. It's a fascinating book. And a ton of those questions are they're just interesting questions. Yeah. I would suggest that's a date night once a month, just right there. Right? I mean, you're already married, so there's no pressure of like, hey, you better get the right answer or we're not getting married. So go get the book, and you'd be amazed how many questions even now, start funny, interesting,
Yeah.
intimate conversations between you and your spouse. And also, I would challenge you, think about, hey, if we had answered this question while we were dating, what would our answers have been? And would we even have gotten married if we had talked through some of these questions? It's a fun way to like think about, because we were all, I would imagine, probably most of us would say we were way more immature when we dated than we are now.
Of course. So there's also a book called 3,000 Questions About Me. And we have that book. We really like it.
Yeah.
And it can be definitely a good conversation starter.
Right. And not all of them are like, share your deepest fear. Right? Some of them are
easy.
silly, right? Yeah. And fun. And man, I would, that's one way that you can, invite intimacy into your date nights, is just have some sort of habit that you guys start where, maybe you spend the first half hour just talking about one or two of those questions as kind of an icebreaker. Because to lead on to our next point, we've got date, don't hang out. When you're doing dating at home, it's an intentional thing. We're dating, we're not hanging out for this time period. Invite intimacy, and then don't let the grind hijack your date night. This is a big one, I think, particularly when you are dating at home.
Yes.
There's something about getting in a car and going somewhere, just the two of you without kids, or just the two of you without having to wear a mask and a hazmat suit and all sorts of other things, where you can go, all right, this is away from the grind of life, we're going out.
Yeah.
Right? But for when you're doing home dates at home, you have to be even more intentional about, hey, for this time period, we're on a date.
And I have to be awake.
Yes.
This week, our date at home, I don't know, I was so tired, and Nathan doesn't get home till really late because of baseball, so I think he got home like 8:45, and by the time he showered and whatever, it was like 9:20, and I was asleep on the couch.
It was not good.
I was asleep on the couch, and that was our day. We talked for like half an hour, I think, and I felt so bad.
It happens sometimes.
It does. So sometimes the grind is going to get in the way, but we try really hard not to. But
right, and that's going to happen. That's going to.
Yep.
We want to have grace with these home dates, but the other side of that is, I'm talking more about like it's really easy to do a home date. And, maybe you're cooking dinner for your spouse as part of the date, and then you sit down to eat, and it's like, did you hear about what happened to Jackson at school today?
Yeah.
Right, and now pretty soon the date has turned into just normal talking about our kids, our jobs.
Yeah, that's a good point.
The house is dirty, whatever the stuff is.
Yeah.
And so, don't be intentional about creating, entering into an agreement as a couple. Hey, Tuesday night, starting at 8:30, we're having a date night.
Yep.
And that means we're not talking about the kids. We're not talking about, that life grindy adulting stuff that has to get done. At that time, we're just focused on the two of us having fun together.
That's great.
Focused on each other.
Okay, so how do we do this?
So the first thing, we've talked about it already, but the biggest tip for you for having dates at home, treat it like a date, right? Have a formal title for it, that we are going on a home date this night, this week. This is what we're doing. This is going to be a date night. And then you both know, like, this is different than we're just going to do the dishes and then we'll throw a show on or whatever. Like, you've both decided this tonight, even though we're not going out this week, this night is our date night.
Yeah. And so then along with that, plan it. Have it on your calendar. We plan our date nights for the whole year starting at the beginning of the year, and it's just the same day a week, so it's not like anything magical, but it goes on our calendar and it is blocked off on our calendar. We don't schedule things on that time, and if for some reason we have to, then we move that to another day of the week, so we don't just skip it. But it's on our calendar, so we plan the day, we plan the time, and then typically that week that we're doing it, sometime before the date, we'll talk about what we're doing. So somebody will suggest, hey, let's play this game, or I have this list of things I'd like for us to discuss that's not just the grind sort of stuff, or whatever that might be. Sometimes it's watching a movie. We try not to do that very often. But we have definitely the day and the time and usually the activity decided so that it's just kind of plug and play.
It's a formal thing.
It is a formal thing. We know what's going on. It's going to happen.
Right. There's nothing more frustrating if you remember dating than when you'd pick up your date and you'd get in the car. And girls, maybe this is even more a frustration of yours than guys. But the guy come pick you up and you'd get in the car and he'd say what I've been told is the most hated of all phrases.
Where do you want to go?
What do you want to do? Yeah, I mean, I've heard from a number of women that's a giant no-no for a date.
Yeah,
be
it's
prepared.
Totally cool to ask that before the date.
Sure, right. But you plan ahead because it's a formal date.
Yeah.
And it says something about how serious you take that event. If I come to pick you up at your house and then I go, I'm sorry, I couldn't even be bothered thinking about this ahead of time. Yeah. Right? All right, so treat it like a date, plan ahead for the date night, and then the next point I have is dress to impress. So this is a date. It is a formal date. That's how we want to encourage you guys to think about it so that it comes as close to a date out as you can without going out. And part of that is, for some reason, when we have dates in, it can be really easy to like, well, we're not going anywhere. So I'm just throwing on the sweats and
that's what I do.
A t-shirt. And
I'm just going to be honest.
And I'm just going to, whatever. I'm here. And man, I would encourage don't do that. Because, I think, again, it creates it a more formal atmosphere for a date. And I'm using that term not like I don't wear a suit and tie. I mean, I guess if you're into that, then wear that. But I don't mean it to sound like, hey, it needs to be really hoity-toity and formal. I just mean
put some jeans on.
It should say. I wanted to send the clear message to my spouse that, hey, I'm serious about dating you, and I want you to know I don't take that for granted, and I want to be someone that you want to continue dating, even if the date is walking all the way from our closet to downstairs to have our date.
So I think another how-to is to alternate planning. So take turns with planning the date. Don't expect your spouse to just always come up with the ideas. That might be exhausting after a while.
Sure.
But come up with some of the ideas of what you're going to do too. And sometimes, that can be easy stuff, or sometimes maybe you should put some effort into it.
Sure.
And that, I think, could speak volumes to your spouse. Mm-hmm. And just taking the time to really think what would be meaningful and putting some effort into that. Yeah,
and when you do that, there's kind of two things to think about. One is prefer your spouse. Mm-hmm. So if you're planning, it's easy to plan a date that I want to go on because I'm me. But planning a date with Andrea in mind and pursuing her with the activities that I kind of lay out that we're going to do is sends a clearer message to her that, hey, I want to date you on your terms because I value you. Excuse me. And so one is prefer your spouse, and two, discover new stuff together, right? Nobody loves the rut, right? I mean, everybody's we just did a Marriage by Design live a couple Sunday nights ago where the question was about what, if you could do one date, what would you pick for your date? Mm-hmm. And we've all thought about those, like, man, I'd love to go skydiving, or I'd love, all these crazy things. You know what nobody ever says when you ask that question?
I want to stay home.
I'd really love to go to Applebee's and then to a movie. Because we've all done that like 1,000 times. Mm-hmm. So, it's thinking creatively about that. Don't do a date night where what the activity you plan is something that you did 3 times at home in the last week.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, do something different. Right? I mean, we've done escape room in a box stuff for date nights. We've
sang duets together.
We've sang duets together. We've danced in the living room, cleared some of the furniture away and danced in the living room. We've What else have we
inside.
done? Yes, had a picnic inside. We have done that.
We've read books together, so
Yeah.
like, not that we're doing something separately. We're reading the same book. Somebody's reading aloud, and then we discuss that, and that's fun.
We've watched shows or movies that are more discussion type things, right? I mean, we watched American Gospel together and talked through that.
You want to hear a fun date night? So Nathan and I used to be, we used to have a long distance relationship when we were dating, because I lived in a different state. And that was at the time of Netflix. Yeah,
you're about to lose.
Oh man. Netflix is still thing. That was the time of Netflix where you would order the DVDs and they would send them to you in the mail, People
are like, what?
I know. Yes. And then you would return them when you were done. Anyway, so we would order the same DVDs. Well, Nathan probably had the DVD because he has thousands of them. But anyway, I would order a DVD that he had. We would plug it into our DVD players and we would press play at the same time, and we would watch the movie on our cell phones together at the same time, but have a date. That was super unique. I loved that. And we would probably do that. I don't know. We probably did that a few times a month.
Yeah.
At least. So, fun little fact there for you.
That's right. It's fun.
I brought that up. Anyway,
it's fun. So,
it was fun. We've done some fun things.
Right. So when you're planning dates, prefer your spouse. And don't be afraid to discover new things.
Yeah. Take turns doing it, though.
That's right.
Great. So kind of just to wrap it all up, super important to date, even if you're stuck at home.
Yep.
Because of a pandemic, because of kids, because of disability, whatever it might be. Just because you're stuck at home doesn't mean that all the fun goes out the window, or that you can't have the intimacy of dating, because it's still really important and you need to prioritize your marriage.
Right.
So don't abandon going on dates.
Yeah.
And make sure you're pursuing your spouse that way.
That's right. That's right. So we've talked about how the pendulum can swing both ways. So you can, just completely abandon dates when you're stuck at home, which is bad. But then you can swing that over to the other side where, you sort of take and usually this can be born out of laziness, where you always do home dates and we don't ever go anywhere together.
Yeah. Yeah. Make sure you're getting out some. And we talked about that, but, whatever that looks like, don't just do home dates as 100% of the time.
Right.
Make sure some of your dates are going out and that you're doing the same thing there. You're being intentional. You're not doing the same old dinner and a movie.
Right.
Switch off with the planning. Make it exciting. Prefer your spouse in what you're planning.
That's right.
But get out. And so some creative ways to get out, if that's difficult for you, is maybe go out after the kids go to bed. So maybe there's somebody that would be willing to come over if they didn't have to do a whole lot of work. Maybe you've got a lot of kids and it's just a lot of work to watch those kids. So sometimes we go on dates when our kids are in bed. So we'll put them to bed, maybe even put them to bed early if you can. And then we might have somebody come. So we'll put our kids to bed and then have somebody come over and just hang out at our house while our kids are sleeping, and we go out after that. It's a great time to go out. It's obviously a really low stress job for whoever comes over.
Right.
And it's great for us. We can be out for a couple hours and it works out great. Yep. Sometime maybe a Saturday morning is a better date time. I don't know. There's all sorts of ways you can find ways to go out. Maybe you trade babysitting with a friend, so you watch their kids once and they watch yours.
Yep.
Don't let money or any of those things become obstacles.
Right. Just be creative.
Yep.
Yeah, and as a Christian couple, remember that your relationship, your marriage, is meant to be a picture of God's desired relationship with us as his people. So when you go out as a couple, you're entering the mission field, because other people are going to see how you interact together, and they're going to learn something, particularly if they see you praying together before a meal, or something that indicates that you're people of faith. People notice that. I mean, how many dates have we been out on where servers specifically made a comment to us about, man, it's good to see a couple that goes out and talks instead of just sitting on their phones.
Yeah.
Lots. So yeah, lots. So do that, right? Go out in the mission field and put your marriage on display for those around to see.
Yeah.
But while you're stuck at home, don't stop dating. It's critically important. Your kids are depending on you to foster and be intentional about that intimate relationship between you and your spouse.
And it's fun.
And it's fun. So go do it, starting this week. Guys, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate you being here. We'll have Family Friday coming at you here in a few days, and then our live event over the weekend on Sunday. Until then, guys, remember, God is for your marriage.
Hey, thanks for joining us on Marriage by Design. If you were impacted by this video, like it by hitting the thumbs up below. Also, don't forget to subscribe, and once you subscribe, hit the bell icon so you can be notified when new episodes release.
Excellent. Also, one of the huge pillars of our show is interactivity between us and you. So we would love you to comment down in the comments below if you have thoughts about this video, or if you have questions or other things you'd like to see considered in the future. In addition, if you'd like, you can email us. That's marriagebydesignpodcast@gmail.com. We're also on Instagram @marriagebydesignpodcast, or you can find us on Facebook by searching Marriage by Design Podcast. Finally, if you want to, you can tweet at us. We do have a Twitter account that is @MarriageXDesign. Thanks, and have a great day.